The broadcast began with a trumpet of static and flickering light, then resolved into the smug face of a Volcari diplomat, his four eyes blinking asynchronously. Behind him stood the towering banners of the Galactic Empire, their sigils glowing in red and gold. With a flick of his wrist, the camera panned down to show the prisoner, a human, bound at the wrists and knees, forced to kneel before a crowd of jeering alien dignitaries. Her face was bruised, but her expression remained carved in stone. This, the Volcari announced in flawless Terran English, is what your warriors amount to: small, soft, and easily caught. Behold your earthborn predator, the infamous Sergeant Riley Shaw. A ripple of laughter spread through the assembly, harsh and barking, like steel grinding against steel. Riley said nothing. Her gaze swept over the audience with cold detachment, memorizing every insignia, every face. One of the guards nudged her with the butt of a plasma spear, and though pain flashed through her eyes, she didn't flinch. The Volcari prided themselves on spectacle. This entire charade was for the cameras, to pacify their citizenry and warn upstart species of the price of defiance. They caught a human sniper. So what? In their minds, humans were still evolutionary toddlers playing war with stone tools. They didn't understand precision. They didn't respect silence. To them, war was numbers, and Riley was just one. They would come to regret that. 2 weeks earlier, Riley had moved through the dense terrain of the Curious Expanse, cloaked in a heat-dampening suit and carrying her custom-modified M102 rail sniper, a weapon her scientists had designed for zero-gravity kill zones. Her mission was simple: disable a key Volcari relay station responsible for triangulating Terran fleet signatures. The sniper squad operated in silence and shadows. Riley was the last one left. She'd already eliminated 5 guards when the sky opened with the cold whine of descending Volcari ships. She ran, ducked into gullies and scrub, darted between iron-bark trees. She'd trusted the data, the drop zone, the encrypted safe zone coordinates. She didn't expect a betrayal. The Volcari hadn't found her by chance. They were waiting. She'd fought. God, how she fought. For confirmed kills, another wounded, her railgun glowing hot from overuse. But plasma nets and sheer numbers did their job. They dragged her through mud and roots, stripping her of weapons and dignity, branding her with their mockery. Now, the feed was transmitted across a dozen star systems. The Volcari ambassador held up Riley's rifle like a trophy, waving it before the cameras. Human craftsmanship, he sneered. Primitive but charming. This is the weapon used to assassinate our forward colonel. A coward's tool. Riley finally spoke. Her voice was low, even, but it cut through the room like a gunshot. 1 bullet, she said. 1 colonel. The Volcari nearest her paused, momentarily unsure how to respond. Another guard backhanded her across the face, drawing blood. Still, she didn't waver. A less seasoned prisoner might have begged. Not Riley. Her mind, even through the haze of pain and humiliation, kept working. Measuring angles, counting exits, remembering names. The ambassador, the guard with a scar across his mandibles, the one who flinched when she spoke. They laughed again. One of them knelt beside her and whispered, "You'll be a memory in the morning," a footnote in Volcari superiority. She didn't answer. Words were for people who needed to be understood. She only needed time. Back in her cell, the walls hummed with energy fields, the air thick with antiseptic chemicals. She was given a nutrient paste that tasted like metal and failure. A single, flickering screen looped the footage of her public humiliation. Each time it restarted, she watched without blinking. Her fingers itched for a trigger. They'd stripped her of her armor, her tools, her rifle, but not her training, not her will. Riley began counting shifts. Every cycle, the guards changed in a predictable pattern. One, smaller than the rest, lingered near the door before departing. She watched how their keys were exchanged, how one guard liked to brag about the pelt he would take from her corpse. He'd die first. In the corner of her cell, she etched tallies with a shard of broken polyglass. Not of days, but of targets. She didn't sleep much. Dreams, when they came, were jagged and blood-soaked. Her last squad mate, Phillips, slumped over his rifle, the betrayal signal echoing in her ear. Her commanding officer's last words. "We don't leave marks, Riley, only graves." One night, as the hum of the field stuttered during a power recalibration, she noticed the timing. 0.6 seconds of system reset every 24 hours. Not much, but enough. Enough for someone with her speed. They thought she was broken, that the message had landed, that mocking one human would cow the rest of Earth's forces. But what they didn't understand, what they never bothered to learn, was that Riley Shaw wasn't Symbol. She was a weapon, and weapons don't forget. Outside the prison walls, the Empire was already moving on, planning its next conquest, its next show of dominance. No one cared about a lone human, bound in a cell. The mocking broadcast slowed. The guards relaxed. The lights flickered on their usual schedule. Riley smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of a loaded chamber, a calm before ignition. The Empire didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. A storm was gathering, slow and invisible, not in fleets, not in bombs, but in a single, patient hunter with a memory like a blade. And it would start here in this cell with blood and silence. The hum died for exactly 0.6 of a second. That was all she needed. Riley moved as the power grid dipped, slipping the sliver of glass from her palm and jamming it into the panel at the back of her restraints. The guard outside, half dozing in the amber glow of a stimulant lamp, never saw the change. The cuffs popped loose with a soft hiss. She exhaled slowly, like squeezing the air out of the chamber before detonation. Her muscles ached from confinement, but the motion was smooth, quiet, practiced. She crept to the edge of the cell, bare feet barely whispering against the alged floor. The door flickered with residual energy from the barrier field, but she'd memorized the timing. Just as the reboot cycle began again, she crossed the threshold, rolled low, and vanished into the shadow beneath the walkway. The guard glanced up too late. Riley came up behind him, gripped his mandibles, and twisted until something cracked. He dropped soundlessly. She caught his body before it clattered and dragged him into the cell. The uniform was too large for a frame, but the key card and his biometric patch were all she needed. Moving through the prison corridors required a predator's patience. The Volcari built their facilities with brutal simplicity, symmetrical, cold, sterile. She adapted. She had no rifle, but she scavenged an electric baton, a carbon-plated gauntlet, a shock collar retooled into a makeshift snare. She became a ghost in the wiring, cutting camera feeds, looping guard chatter, hiding in blind spots the architects never imagined anyone would exploit. It took hours, maybe longer. Time blurred into action. When she finally reached the evidence vault, her breath caught, not at the weapons, but at the sight of her railgun intact, polished, mounted like a trophy above a slab of alien stone. They'd displayed it. They'd mocked her with it. She took it down with reverence. The grip still bore the impression of her fingers, the dings from her last confirmed kill on Fedrin Ridge. She calibrated it by feel, whispering numbers under her breath. Range, drop compensation, heat delay. The scope had been tampered with. She fixed it. Boots thundered above. She was out of time. She moved like instinct, slipping into an unused maintenance shaft and navigating through ducts too narrow for the average Volcari. Through one. She saw a hallway below, a Volcari lieutenant barking orders, ordering a sector lockdown, annoyed that yet another prisoner had vanished during diagnostics. Riley flipped the scope's focus. One breath, one squeeze. The lieutenant dropped mid-sentence, a neat hole through the side of his cranial crest. Panic spread like wildfire. The guard scrambled without direction. Riley was already gone. She reached the hangar just as alarms shrieked to life. A shuttle stood prepped and refueling, its pilot offloading supplies nearby. She sprinted, cloaked by chaos, and climbed aboard. The pilot returned seconds too late. Riley clubbed him unconscious, dragged him out, and sealed the hatch. Inside the cockpit, alien glyphs glowed along the interface. She ran a cold boot diagnostic, skipping formal systems. Human engineers had trained her for chaos. She didn't need to understand every button, just enough to fake fluency. The ship rose like a question hurled into the night. Beyond the planet's stratosphere, Riley stared at the stars. She should have felt relief. Instead, there was a void, the kind that only retribution could fill. She transmitted no signal, lit no beacon. Let them think her dead. But her war had only just begun. In a remote sector 3 days later, a Volcari listening post stopped transmitting. A recovery crew arrived to find only silence, charred walls, empty helmets, and a phrase carved into the command console in human script. You mocked a ghost. Now you've summoned one. No one claimed responsibility. Whispers spread. Speculation turned to fear. The lone sniper had survived, and she was hunting. Riley had left no trace but the message, and a single bullet casing placed on the commandant's desk. The pattern continued. A convoy transporting new AI tacticians exploded in vacuum. A senior war advisor was found dead in his own palace. The glass of his skylight untouched, the entry point unknown. Riley's rifle spoke from impossible distances, and her face never appeared. Only the calling cards, the messages, the precision, the silence before chaos. Across Volcari systems, a name began to circulate. The One-Eyed Spectre. No species had confirmed its source, but the name stuck. Some said she died and been reborn as a weapon. Others claimed the humans had bred her in labs, engineered to dismantle empires one breath at a time. The truth was simpler. She was angry. Every strike was deliberate. Every kill chosen. She never went after the innocent, never indulged in collateral damage. Riley wasn't waging terror. She was delivering lessons. Don't mock what you don't understand. Don't provoke what you can't silence. The Volcari High Council debated deploying elite bounty hunters, activating experimental anti-infiltration drones. They underestimated her again. These were answers to noise, to reckless aggression. But Riley was something else entirely. She infiltrated their communications network using stolen clearance and a translator core she ripped from the first AI ship she dismantled. She sent a transmission, not to the council, but to the people, translated into a dozen Volcari dialects. You call me prey. You laughed. I want you to remember that sound. She ended the message with the final moments of her capture, her broken face, their laughter, then silence. On a moon orbiting their diplomatic capital, the power grid collapsed at midnight. When the backup lights flickered on, a statue outside the Hall of Triumph had been defaced. The alien effigy of Volcari superiority now bore human armor and a sniper rifle aimed skyward. The next morning, a senator refused to speak. His daughter, studying off-world, had been returned unharmed, asleep in her bed with a note. You taught me how to get in. Thank you for the lesson. Riley wasn't chasing revenge. She was evolving war itself, one shot at a time. The Empire had laughed. Now it listened. And somewhere in the black between systems, a lone hunter aligned her scope with the next target. The first sign that the Empire was unraveling came not from a battlefield, but from a theater. In the capital city of Draxon, a propaganda play dramatizing the capture of the human sniper opened to a packed crowd. The final scene, a Volcari actor portraying Riley Shaw groveling for mercy, was interrupted by the stage lights shattering in a single, silent second. A delay of breath followed. Then the lead actor fell, twitching, a hole in his synthetic forehead. No sound, no warning. Just death from an impossible angle. Panic exploded across the auditorium. Screams echoed against marble walls. The scene was cut from every news feed within minutes, but the damage was done. The One-Eyed Spectre had spoken again. Riley watched the aftermath from a satellite feed she'd hijacked, seated in the hollowed hull of a derelict freighter. The Volcari might command fleets and warp lanes, but they didn't understand the anatomy of fear. She wasn't targeting soldiers now. She was carving into the myth of their supremacy, stroke by surgical stroke. The Volcari began assigning escorts to officials, tripling guard rotations. Yet it never mattered. One by one, names from Riley's internal list disappeared. Tacticians, scientists, advisors, each one essential to the machine that had mocked her into action. She didn't always kill. Sometimes she left only messages. An admiral's bedroom mirror bore a crosshair etched by hand, and nothing more. The admiral resigned 2 days later, claiming health issues. A senior engineer found every document in his office erased. replaced with a single line repeating 1,000 times. "She's in the system." He disappeared en route to a security conference. Each calculated act deepened the silence between Volcari leadership and its people. They no longer spoke of the specter. They tried to bury her beneath louder wars and louder speeches. But in that silence, Riley grew louder still. What began as vengeance became doctrine. On the mining moon of Kelleris 7, she found a different kind of target. Human laborers, abducted and enslaved, were kept in underground compounds to power the Volcari's resource surge. They were malnourished, forgotten. She slipped through the vents like vapor, disarmed 2 security posts, and rerouted power long enough to open every cell. A boy, no older than 15, stared at her from the doorway, eyes hollow. She handed him a ration pack and said only, "Find the shadows. They'll protect you now." When word spread that the Spectre freed humans instead of killing indiscriminately, sympathizers began to emerge. A disgraced Volcari tactician transmitted blueprints of a command station. A smuggler dropped weapons caches marked with Terran glyphs on abandoned relay towers. Riley never met them, never promised anything. But they followed the direction of her rifle like worshippers chasing a star. Not all support was willing. Some were coerced, cornered with impossible odds, and offered a single deal: help her or be silenced. She did not claim to be noble. She wasn't building a rebellion. She was proving a point. 1 shot could change policy. 2 could collapse it. In the Galactic Council, other species began to take note. The Branax, a war-born hive known for respecting only power, paused their skirmishes to watch Riley's campaign unfold. The Loralians, masters of diplomatic neutrality, quietly canceled all trade with the Volcari. In less than 4 cycles, Riley Shaw had altered the shape of interstellar relations without firing more than 24 rounds. And still, the Volcari misunderstood. They thought this was terrorism, that she was sowing chaos for attention, for vengeance. They didn't realize they were playing by rules she'd already rewritten. The Emperor himself appeared on a secure transmission, flanked by honor guards and speaking through gritted mandibles. The human cower remains a threat only because we've allowed her narrative to persist. She will be found, and she will be ended. Our legacy cannot be challenged by a primitive. Riley hacked into the relay mid-broadcast. She didn't show her face. Only her voice came through, crystalline and precise. "I am your legacy." The screen went dark. The message played on a loop across the core systems before the feeds were shut down. Volcari pride began to crack. Paranoia crept through their ranks. Officials questioned each other's loyalty. Pilots hesitated before missions. Field agents burned their own orders out of fear they might be traced. She was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom written into the pulse of every terminal. In orbit around Nethros Prime, the elite Volcari bounty unit Black Claw intercepted a freighter with a false signature. The vessel was empty, except for a single data module. Inside was a recording, 1 by 1, every name and rank of the Black Claw unit, spoken in Riley's voice. The last entry was the name of their captain, followed by the sound of a breath and a click. The captain died 5 hours later, poisoned by a trace chemical laced into his rations during refueling. No one could explain how. No one ever would. Within the month, she brought down a communications array with a single bullet, fired from a converted mining tool at twice the calculated maximum range. Engineers called it impossible. Mathematicians redrew models. She ignored them all. Her goal had never been to prove possibility. She was reminding them who they'd humiliated and what they had built from that act of mockery. Even her old CO, Colonel Reyes, watching from the safety of a Terran moon base, whispered to his aides, "She's become something we didn't train, something we unleashed." And still, Riley moved, silent, focused, her eyes locked on one final piece. The Emperor, the one who had watched her brought low with bored disdain. She began planning the last strike, not as revenge, but as punctuation. Her war wasn't about killing power. It was about precision, about making sure the last thing the Volcari remembered wasn't the sound of their anthem, but the silence that followed a human's aim. She adjusted the settings on her scope, recalibrating for atmosphere, density, and rotation. Her finger curled against the trigger, And she smiled. The palace was less a building than a monument to domination, its spire spearing the atmosphere, cloaked in polished obsidian and reinforced with hulls scavenged from the ruins of vanquished civilizations. From orbit, it looked like a black sun atop the Volcari capital. Inside, it pulsed with hubris. The Emperor's private observatory stood at the pinnacle of that fortress, a chamber of gold-veined glass and gravity-defying architecture, open to the stars yet protected by a multi-layered shield array, the place where Threx believed himself most secure. Riley had been watching it for weeks. 31 days of meticulous observation, memorizing shift changes, identify which guards like to cut corners, which drones use outmoded firmware. She mapped the pulse of the security systems with the care of a surgeon studying an artery before making the first cut. Her patience was not born of caution. It was weaponized intent. She arrived beneath the grand spire in a drone pod carrying maintenance waste, her body folded in with carbon casings and thermal foil to avoid biometric detection. Her path wound upward through utility shafts and forgotten tunnels, many sealed decades ago when the palace had been modernized for imperial theatrics. But even empires forgot their own blueprints. She didn't. Her rifle, broken down into 7 components, was reassembled in silence on a narrow ledge 1.4 kilometers from the terrace where the Emperor took his evening walk. She lay prone in the chill wind, sighting through the scope as night fell over the city. The world below gleamed with artificial light and synthetic order. Every building, every glowing avenue, was a testament to Volcari precision, but even perfection bred cracks. And Riley Shaw had become gravity to those cracks, unseen, unstoppable, inevitable. At exactly 1904 local time, Emperor Threx emerged onto the upper deck of the observatory. Tall, resplendent in ceremonial armor laced with nanogold and blood crystal, he stood like a god surveying his dominion. Around him, shields shimmered faintly, visible only through specialized optics. Riley adjusted her scope, calculated refraction curves, analyzed wind pressure, using the rising plumes from thermal exhaust towers below. One breath. She remembered his face from the feed the day they paraded her to the central arena, his mandibles flexed in amused disdain, arms crossed as the crowd howled. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't needed to. His indifference had screamed louder than any verdict. Now, it was her turn to deliver judgment. The rifle's core hummed with built-up charge. Her heartbeat slowed to a crawl. The moment stretched. Then, pressure. The shot was like the closing of a book. Quiet, unassuming, final. The round, custom-forged and microfinned arced through 2 atmospheric layers, banked off a reinforced skylight, and struck the Emperor just below the crest of his third eye. He crumpled mid-step, 1 foot still poised as a commanding stars. There was no sound from the palace. No alarm yet. For the span of 3 seconds, nothing changed. Then everything did. Lights dimmed. Alarms stuttered into motion. Emergency protocols flared to life as the elite guard scrambled to secure a throne already empty. But Riley was gone before the system caught up. She slipped back through her corridor shadows, retracting her presence like a vanishing blade. She exited the palace district through an aqueduct long since rerouted, emerging into utility network beneath the capital. A cloaked freighter waited 2 kilometers west, hidden among dozens of automated transports. Inside were 4 silent humans, operatives, defectors, ghosts like her. None asked if the shot landed. They didn't need to. As the ship lifted off, Riley sat near the observation port, watching the city shrink beneath the clouds. Sirens pulsed from distant towers. She imagined the Volcari scrambling, running diagnostics, interrogating personnel, scanning for a trace that didn't exist. She had erased her digital signature years ago. All that remained of her was memory and fear. News of the assassination spread through the empire like wildfire trapped in glass. At first, state media denied it. Then they spun it. Finally, they fell silent altogether. But the absence of truth only made the myth louder. On far-flung colonies, her name, spoken in whispers, became a catalyst. A mining outpost on the edge of the Helix Veil declared independence. 2 transport hubs were seized by human workers who scrawled her symbol in chalk across docking bays, a single circle with a line bisecting it. Her rifle's reticle. She had not planned revolution, but she'd lit its fuse. And on Earth, back at command, Colonel Reyes received a message. Phase complete. Awaiting new directive. He stared at it for a long time before replying. No directive. Stand down. He knew she wouldn't, because this war was no longer about orders. It wasn't even about revenge. Riley Shaw had become an idea sharpened to a point. She wasn't killing to punish the Empire. She was dissecting its story, undermining the belief that the Volcari could not be challenged, that humanity had no teeth. Now they knew better. She stood alone in the freighter's viewing bay, arms crossed, rifle resting on the magnetic rack beside her. The others had gone quiet, respecting the weight of the moment. Stars spilled across the void ahead, indifferent and cold. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. But her eyes stayed fixed on the galactic map hovering in front of her, now dotted with systems where fear had taken root. Her war wasn't over. Because even as one tyrant fell, others would rise, built from the same arrogance, the same assumptions. She would find them. She would watch. She would wait. And when they laughed again, she would be there. One shot, one breath, one lesson at a time.